You're a police detective in 1974, and you receive a letter in the mail. It's typed on a manual typewriter, and it starts with a chilling familiarity that makes your blood run cold. The writer is claiming to be the Zodiac Killer, the serial murderer who has terrorized the San Francisco Bay Area for 5 years, taunting police with cryptic letters and ciphers. But this letter is different. There's no cipher, no specific threat, no body count claim. Just a rambling complaint about a movie and a sign-off that reads, "Me equals 37. Then, silence. Weeks turn into months, months into years, and no more letters arrive. Decades pass, and the Zodiac never writes again. Or does he? That final confirmed letter, sent in January 1974, has sparked a 50-year debate about whether the Zodiac really stopped communicating, or whether his later letters were simply never authenticated. And buried within that last message might be clues that investigators are still trying to decode today. Welcome back to Crime Scout, True Stories. The Zodiac Killer sent at least 20 confirmed letters to newspapers and police between 1969 and 1974. But the last verified communication remains one of the most enigmatic, and it raises questions that challenge everything we think we know about when the Zodiac's reign of terror actually ended. To understand the significance of the final letter, we need context. The Zodiac Killer emerged in the late 1960s, murdering at least 5 people in the San Francisco Bay Area, though he claimed 37 victims. His confirmed kills were brutal and random, targeting young couples in isolated areas. But what made him truly terrifying wasn't just the murders, it was the psychological warfare he waged through the mail. He sent letters to major newspapers containing ciphers, threats to commit mass murder, and pieces of victims' clothing as proof of his crimes. He demanded his letters be printed on front pages, threatening to go on killing sprees if newspapers didn't comply. He created a symbol, a circle with a cross through it, that became synonymous with terror. And he loved the attention, signing his letters with that distinctive symbol and taunting police with his intelligence. The letters came frequently in 1969 and 1970, sometimes multiple communications in a single month. The Zodiac seemed obsessed with publicity, with proving he was smarter than law enforcement, with maintaining control over the narrative. His longest cipher, containing 340 characters, wouldn't be solved for 51 years. He referenced movies, made cryptic allusions to his identity, and demonstrated knowledge that suggested he might be following the investigation closely. Then, gradually, the letters became less frequent. 1971 saw fewer communications. 1972 had even less. And then came 1974. The letter that is officially recognized as the Zodiac's last confirmed communication was postmarked January 29, 1974, and sent to the San Francisco Chronicle. Unlike his earlier theatrical mailings, this one was strangely mundane. It was typed, not handwritten like many previous letters, on a manual typewriter that investigators would later try to trace. The letter complained about the film The Exorcist, which had been released in December 1973 and was playing in theaters. The Zodiac claimed he'd seen the movie and thought it was the best satirical comedy he'd seen since The Laugh-In. This reference to the popular TV show was oddly casual, almost conversational. But then came the line that has obsessed investigators for decades. The letter concluded with, "Me equals 37, SFPD equals 0. This was the Zodiac claiming credit for 37 murders, far more than the 5 he was definitively linked to. Was this number real? Was he counting attempted murders that survived? Was he including crimes that were never connected to him? Or was he simply inflating his body count for psychological impact, trying to cement his legacy as one of history's most prolific killers? The letter was signed with his distinctive cross-circle symbol, and handwriting analysis determined it was consistent with previous confirmed Zodiac correspondence. The postmark, the writing implements, the tone, all checked out. Law enforcement and newspaper staff who'd been receiving these letters for 5 years agreed this was authentic. And then, nothing. The Zodiac went silent. Except, maybe he didn't. This is where the story gets complicated. After January 1974, several more letters claiming to be from the Zodiac arrived at various newspapers and police departments. Some came in 1974, others in 1975, and a few even trickled in during the late 70s and early 80s. But none of these later letters were ever officially authenticated as genuine Zodiac communications. They lacked the specific details, the consistent handwriting, or the insider knowledge that had characterized the confirmed letters. Law enforcement and document examiners concluded they were hoaxes, sent by copycats seeking attention or trying to inject themselves into the infamous case. But what if they were wrong? What if some of those disputed letters were actually genuine, and the Zodiac had simply changed his methodology to avoid detection? This is the theory that keeps some investigators up at night. The problem is that authentication is complicated. The Zodiac never provided a definitive proof of identity that could be used to verify later communications. There was no code word, no secret only he would know, nothing that couldn't be faked by someone who'd studied the case carefully. One disputed letter, sent in 1978, contained details about the Zodiac's crimes that weren't widely public. Another, from 1986, referenced the ongoing investigation in ways that suggested insider knowledge. Were these genuine communications from an aging killer who'd changed his writing style? Or were they sophisticated hoaxes by someone obsessed with the case? Without DNA evidence, definitive handwriting matches, or confessions, we simply don't know. The content of the January 1974 letter itself has been analyzed exhaustively. Why did the Zodiac choose to write about The Exorcist? Some theorists believe the film's themes of possession and evil resonated with him, and calling it a comedy was his way of signaling that he identified with the demon, not the humans fighting it. Others think it was completely random, just whatever happened to be in theaters when he felt like writing. The casual tone has led some profilers to suggest the Zodiac might have been losing interest in his cat-and-mouse game, that the thrill was fading, which could explain why he stopped, if indeed he did stop. The claim of 37 victims has launched countless investigations into unsolved murders across California and beyond from the late 60s and early 70s. Detectives have tried to connect the Zodiac to murders in Southern California, in the Central Valley, even in other states. Some cases have intriguing similarities: victims shot or stabbed in remote areas, crimes with no clear motive, evidence suggesting the killer wanted to terrorize rather than just kill. But without physical evidence linking these crimes to the confirmed Zodiac murders, they remain speculation. Modern DNA analysis has given the investigation new life. In recent years, genetic genealogy, the same technique that caught the Golden State Killer, has been applied to Zodiac evidence. DNA extracted from saliva on envelope seals and stamps from the letters has been developed into a partial profile. In 2021, a team of investigators claimed they'd used this DNA and genealogical databases to identify the Zodiac as a man who died in 2018. However, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies have not confirmed this identification, and the case officially remains open and unsolved. The psychological question of why the Zodiac stopped writing, assuming the 1974 letter was truly his last, has generated numerous theories. Serial killers typically don't just stop unless they're incapacitated, imprisoned for other crimes, dead, or have moved away. Some investigators believe the Zodiac died or was institutionalized shortly after 1974, which would explain the sudden silence. Others think he might have been arrested for an unrelated crime and served prison time, preventing him from communicating. A darker possibility is that he simply evolved, continuing to kill but without the theatrical letter writing that had defined his earlier crimes, making his later murders impossible to connect. There's also the possibility that the attention dried up and he lost interest. By 1974, the Zodiac was old news. The initial panic had faded, newspapers were printing his letters on inside pages rather than front pages, and the public had moved on to new fears. For someone who seemed to crave attention and control, this diminishing relevance might have been intolerable. Perhaps he stopped because the game was no longer satisfying. The last confirmed Zodiac letter remains sealed in evidence, a piece of paper that might hold answers we haven't yet found. Modern forensic techniques continue to evolve, and what couldn't be analyzed in 1974 might yield breakthroughs today. Touch DNA, advanced document analysis, and digital forensics are all being applied to the Zodiac evidence with renewed vigor. What we know for certain is this: the Zodiac Killer terrorized Northern California, murdered at least 5 people, and tormented the public with letters for roughly 5 years. His last confirmed communication in January 1974 claimed 37 victims and then fell silent. Whether he actually stopped, whether some of the disputed later letters were genuine, whether he's still alive or died decades ago, these questions remain unanswered. The case is still open, still being investigated, and still waiting for the breakthrough that might finally give victims' families closure. This has been Crime Scout, True Stories. The Zodiac's final letter might not be final at all, and the truth about his fate remains one of true crime's greatest mysteries. Subscribe for more cases where the ending is still being written, and justice is still being pursued.